All right, the first of our flat linear icons that we're going to do for this assignment is the camera. And it looks like obviously this item on the left, and I'm going to go ahead and get started with it. I'm going to scoot it over, and I don't know, I think it'll be okay lurking in the, no, it's going to keep getting in the way. I'm going to have to move it off the screen because there's no way I can have it there without placing a graphic. I don't want to get into all that, but just know that's the one we're working on first, and then I'm going to do a different video for the other ones as well. All right, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to draw a rectangular shape that is about the size and shape that we see for the camera body. In the example image, the item is shown with rounded corners. If we switch from the black arrow to the white arrow, you see these little red dots at the corners. These are equivalent to Adobe's live corners. If you click and drag on them, it allows you to round up those corners. So again, back to where I was. I drew the shape. I switched from the what they call the pointer to the white arrow, which is called the subselect tool. As soon as I did that, I get the little red dots in the corners. When I click on a red dot and drag, I'm able to round them up, and that's what I want to do for that one. So yay, round cornered object. I already have my camera body. I'm good. Next part. I'm going to create the circles that are going to be the lens. I'm going to do them not on top of the rectangle because the default setting for this is this sort of light gray fill with a very thin black stroke, and it's really easy for nested objects to get lost. So I don't want to do that. So I'm going to draw it off and then drag it on. All right, so this is going to be my lens shape. I'm going to go ahead and turn my fill down to 0 so that it is not a problem layered over the other. And I'm going to turn my border setting up just a little bit so that I can see it more reasonably. So at 2 point, it's a heck of a lot easier to see. Cool thing in Gravit, just as with Illustrator, we can option drag a copy. And since I've gone to the trouble of changing a couple of things with this guy, it is to my benefit to create this copy and then modify the copy to create the nested version of the lens. The other option is to draw 3 circles, make them the right size, put them in the right position, change the settings for the outside of all of them, but I don't want to do that, but you absolutely can. Once I have an Alt or Option dragged set of copies, I'm going to scale the copies. The first one is the biggest one that I want. I'm going to hold down my Shift and my Alt so that I can scale proportionally, meaning the width and the height are scaled the same amount. I'm going to drag my new circle inside of the original, and then I'm going to scale this guy again with Shift and Alt even more and put it in the center of the 3. I did them in the sequence that I created the copies so that they're all, relatively speaking, in the correct arrange position. Everything that's in front is where it needs to be, but if it weren't, I could always use the arrange options up here. None of these have a fill, so it shouldn't be an issue anyway. But that's where this bring forward, send back, and so forth controls are found. It's the upper section with the sort of swooshy looking arrows. All right, I now have the lens. I'm going to select all of the circles at once. I'm going to drag them up, and I'm going to pop them somewhere not quite halfway across on the camera, and that's making good progress. I now need about 5 more elements, and then this particular icon is done. The first of these elements is going to be another of the rectangles, and it's going to go in this bottom left section. And I am deliberately having mine hang out just a little bit. I'm going to need to work with the corners of it in a minute. But before I can do that, I'm going to need to zoom in on it, and I'm going to need to increase its border so that I can see what the heck I'm doing. So I'm setting the border of that one to 2. I'm going to set the border of the main one also to 2. I think ultimately I'm going to be at 5, but for now this is helpful. And then again, I'm going to zoom in on that corner. All right, so I'm here. If I switch, well, okay, let me select it first. I'm going to select it, and then I'm going to switch to the subselect, and you think, awesome, I need to fix the corners so I can just do the rounding, but that doesn't work as well when you were dealing with an object that it's going to have all four corners adjusted when you only wanted to adjust one of them. So the live corners are not going to help us out, but there is something that will. So I have switched to the white arrow. I've got my smaller rectangle, the one in the bottom left corner, selected. I'm going to the modify menu. I'm going down to path, and and I'm going to go to convert to path. This takes this from being a shape primitive into a more easily editable path-based object, and that's what I need to do. Okay, once I've done that, I can click on any point in this object and edit it independent of the other ones, and that's what needed to happen here. And so I've got the bottom left corner selected. I am going to change this guy to the rounded option that shows up here. I'm in the appearance and joint area, and it looks nuts at the moment, admittedly, but this is actually a good thing. It will be easier for me to tell what I'm doing if I turn the fill of this one off. And once I've done that, I can position this and adjust the handles in such a way that it is correct relative to the original. And the problem I'm having, to be honest with you, is that most rounded rectangles actually consist of about 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 points instead of 4. I need a couple of more points for this to work really well. I could do it with the mirrored object, or I could add a point or two, which is what I'm going to do. So I have added a point by grabbing the pen tool and clicking on the path area to the left and the right of my corner. Once I have the extras, I can grab those, put them where I need them, get them behaving, and then I can worry about the corner shape itself. This is a little more cumbersome right now than it would have been in Illustrator because they have a tool that would have allowed us to do what we're doing right now just a little bit more easily. Okay, now I've fought with that corner for a few minutes, and it is the correct shape. So just to quickly step back through what I did there, and I'm going to do it not on top so you can see what it looks like again for anybody that is trying to see it. So created the shape, switched to white arrow, went into the modify tool, did path, convert to path, which gave me corner access, converted the corner point into a curved point, which again temporarily makes it look insane. Grab the path tool, which is that pen nib looking one there, and click above and below, or above and to the right of the corner point, and then repositioned these new guys plus that rounded corner point until the shape was appropriate to my original object. And without the reference image, it's a little harder to tell where they need to go, but it gives you a sense of how these should theoretically be able to work. And that's, that's the hard part of this particular object. The rest of it's easier. All right, so I'm going to zoom back out, and what is happening in terms of the original image, or the one we're working toward, is it has some lines on it. So I would grab the line tool and I would draw the lines that need to be here. Ultimately, they're going to need to have a stroke weight that matches. I'm holding the shift key down while I'm drawing these, which allows me to not end up with them at kooky angles. But overall, that takes care of that section. And then the rest of this is about the buttons that are either on the inside or the outside of the object. For the upper ones, they have little rounded or little straight edge rectangles to sort of be an upper button. I'm going to drag and use the edge of the object itself as my guide as to where to stop. And I'll do the same thing on the left and right with these guys. And they look different at the moment because they don't have a stroke, or the stroke is not thick enough. And then the last one goes on the interior, and it's supposed to look like a battery compartment or something like that. All right, so for the objects that I've just drawn, they look weird relative to the object because they don't have a stroke, or they have a very thin stroke, and the rest of it has thicker and all that kind of stuff. I'm actually going to select everything, and I'm going to increase the stroke weight up to the point that I can see what the heck it should look like. I'm going to go with about a 5. And those, for some reason, didn't have anything, so I would have thought that effect just a moment ago would have done them, but it didn't. So let's see if it'll play nice. Apparently, if the setting is effectively none, changing it on the other doesn't fix it, but that did. If you want yours to have essentially a white or transparent background like the other did, you would need to select everything, go into the fill area, and zero out the fill, which would take you to that transparent background. And the last thing, and I asked the people in Illustrator to do this also, make the stroke something other than black. I just picked a really dark red for mine, and that finishes up the object. The last thing I have to do to absolutely finish this so I don't accidentally mess it up in a moment is group it, so that when I move it around to do the others or any scaling or anything like that, I can grab the whole thing without leaving part of it behind. And that's a really good approach to take when you're working in this program. So I'm going to stop and restart the video for the pen nib, but this is the first piece.